Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Danny Haifong. As you can see, I am joined by Professor Mohammad Marandi, joining me from Iran. Professor Marandi, great to see you again.
Thank you, Danny. It's always a great pleasure being on your show.
Everyone hit the like button as we get started here. Well, Professor Marandi, you called it, as you have often in this war. Iran has retaliated very hard after a number of developments just in the last 24 hours. What we had first was, of course, CENTCOM, the United States striking Keshem Island, striking an Iranian ship. This happened over the last few days. And then overnight, Iran retaliated very hard. They promised, the Iranian military did, that every response would be harsher and different and that it should serve as a lesson. I'm just going to review the damage and then I can put up some footage as you're reacting to it, Professor Marandi. According to now satellite images that are coming out, Iran did fire quite a number of missiles. According to reports in the satellite images, 4 warehouses in Kuwait were destroyed, a hangar in Kuwait as well. The Ali Al Salam Air Base, a hangar there, was destroyed. The airport terminal, now we don't know exactly what destroyed the airport terminal because there are footage of U.S. interceptors going completely awry, but the Terminal 1 at the airport terminal in Kuwait was destroyed. And now there's confirmed, and I can pull that one up, satellite imagery that shows that there's a fire in Bahrain, the other country that saw U.S. assets targeted there, a fire at the Sakir Air Base. So now we're hearing dozens of people were actually injured in these strikes. We don't know exactly who or like how they were injured because U.S. Provided interceptors were going up and some of them were coming right back down on people's heads. So, Professor Marandi, your reaction to this retaliation by Iran, why is it happening now? And we are seeing Donald Trump not saying very much about this other than CENTCOM's report that nothing got through and everything was intercepted.
I think it shows that CENTCOM should never be trusted and that the things that they've been saying in the past are probably just as untrue as what we're seeing now. The Kuwaiti airport, I don't know if Iran struck it or not, but it is used by the United States Air Force. And every day, a number of planes come and go, which belong to the U.S. Armed Forces. So these countries, as we've discussed many times before, they are a part of this war. They're engaged in war with Iran, and as long as there are U.S. troops, as long as there are U.S. jets, as long as there are U.S. missiles, and as long as the United States uses their airspace, for Iran, they're legitimate targets, and Iran will retaliate. And this round began with the United States targeting an Iranian oil tanker, or an oil tanker that was associated with Iran, towards an Iranian port, a civilian target at a time of ceasefire. So the Iranians basically sent a harsh message that we're not going to tolerate this anymore. From now on, you strike, we strike much harder. And so you've seen huge damage in Kuwait on U.S. bases and in Bahrain. But the problem is, of course, that the United States and these regimes, they continue to engage in warfare against Iran because bombing Iran or bombing civilian ships or bombing anyone in Iran is an act of war. But in addition to that, siege warfare is an extension of the hot war. It is an act of war. And again, these countries are cooperating with the United States. And for Iran, they consider them as aggressors.
Yeah, well, here's I was putting up some of the evidence contradicting CENTCOM statements that nothing hit at all. Even the strike that happened a few days ago, Professor Marandi, in Kuwait, again targeting the air base by Iran. Americans were injured in that. I think about almost nearly a handful. So this is getting, it seems like hot again. Do you feel, Professor Marandi, that Iran is taking these strikes on, especially Keshim Island? I think it's been twice now, maybe even more times that the U.S. has struck there. Are they taking this seriously in part because they know that the United States and Israel are, well, they may not feel like they can start the war fully because of, let's say, ammunition issues. They've been talking about invading an island, even a limited invasion. They've been talking about targeting islands such as these militarily in the medium term, long term plan for the war. Iran, what are Iran's calculations here in terms of how it responds to every U.S. ceasefire violation from here?
The Iranians believe that the United States, if it has an opportunity to attack Iran, to bomb Iran, and get away with it, it will do it. And the only way to create deterrence is to make Trump and Netanyahu pay a very high price. And so, and we've seen that throughout this war, that Iran does not escalate. It does not initiate war. It does not escalate. But in this war, what it did was that when there was escalation, it would hit back very hard. And we saw that, for example, when they hit Iran's South Pars gas field, the Iranians retaliated and hit the Qatari gas field very hard, and the Emirati installations very hard, and that caused Trump to put out a Truth Social saying that this won't happen again.
Right.
So Iran believes that they have to respond with strength. During the last couple of skirmishes, the U.S. again, they initiated the skirmishes. The Iranians responded, and this time the Iranians responded much harder, with a very significant strike to send Trump a message, and the Trump regime a message that we are not intimidated, and we're going to make you regret whatever you do against Iran. And I think the Iranians feel very confident about their position, militarily speaking. And we also saw that in Lebanon when the Netanyahu regime said that they were going to strike Beirut. The Iranians then said that they're going to start firing missiles at northern Palestine, and then that we saw the Trump Netanyahu phone call, and or two phone calls apparently, and Trump allegedly or supposedly used the F word when speaking to Netanyahu and so on. But regardless of what we think about that conversation and about the Axios report, because Axios is not an honest outlet and not a reliable one, but if let's assume that this conversation actually did take place, which is quite plausible in this particular case, that I think indicates that the Americans understand and the Trump regime understands Iran's strength, and it knows that Iran has the upper hand. So in the case of Lebanon, the Iranians say that enough is enough. You bomb Beirut or any part of Beirut, we're going to pound northern Israel. And Ansarullah in Yemen has also said that they will get involved. And but simultaneously, the siege on the Strait of Hormuz, which is a double-edged sword for Trump, that siege is also wrecking the global economy. So the Iranians know that the United States needs a deal. Trump needs a deal. Today, Trump said that he can wait till September, but I don't think that's really based on what experts on the energy market and economists are saying. He doesn't have that sort of time. So the Iranians, in addition to threatening to strike the Israelis, and they were prepared, they were going to strike the Israeli regime yesterday early in the morning. But then when they backed down, they decided to wait. But if they do strike Beirut, the Iranians will hit them. But in any case, alongside that, the Iranians said we're no longer going to send messages to the United States. In other words, the messages that went back and forth to see if they can strike a deal, the Iranians have said we're not interested right now until the situation in Lebanon becomes changes. Now, that, of course, is a message to Trump saying that if you don't do something about Lebanon and Gaza, because Iran has said clearly that Iran has from the beginning said it's the entire region. But they also, in a couple of days ago, named Gaza. They named Gaza instead of just saying the entire region. They said Lebanon and Gaza. So Trump knows that if there is another wave of missiles and airstrikes between the two sides, then this MOU or this potential agreement would go back weeks at least,
Right.
and that would be catastrophic for the U.S. economy. So I think that the Iranians feel that they are in a strong position. Of course, that doesn't mean that the United States will not strike. That doesn't mean the Israeli regime will not strike. But the Iranians do feel that they're in a strong position.
That's seems to be your words, Professor Marandi, seem to be backed up by the facts here. And, Donald Trump himself told New York Post, because the New York Post asked him directly, I would play the video, but we can't share audio through this platform. But basically the gist of it was he confirmed he said those words to Netanyahu. However, he described his feelings about the situation as being perturbed. And of course, the good old, we have a great relationship between each other and all of that. But nonetheless, Professor Marandi, it also seemed like, Israel flaunted Iran's threats. The U.S. seemed to, the U.S. seemed to take them very, very, very seriously. And then Israel kept striking Lebanon anyway. And in some respects, it seems like yesterday's retaliation too, according to at least Iran and how they're talking, the military, it's a warning that Iran can still strike and strike very hard. Do you foresee then, it doesn't seem like Israel is want for doing anything it can't do, like, for example, stop killing people in Lebanon and Palestine. Do you foresee then that Iran will have to make good on its threats anyway, given that Israel is always unhinged and unable to control itself?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that it can't control itself. It takes pleasure in killing, and we see that in Lebanon. Western journalists in Lebanon, legacy media journalists, corporate media journalists, they are partners in this genocide. They're as sinister as the diplomats in Beirut, Western diplomats in Beirut, because they know what's going on, but they refuse to tell the truth. The Israeli regime is not only bombing families, and not only flattening towns and villages, and not only carrying out carpet bombing in cities in southern and central Lebanon, but they're also targeting medics. They are seeking them out across the country and bombing ambulances and bombing medics. And something like 130 to 140 medics have been killed so far. So they seek them out. It's quite stunning that this is not something in any of the Western media outlets or none of the Western, because the West has all these NGOs, human rights NGOs, women's rights NGOs, well funded, but they've all gone silent. They've disappeared for the last 2.5 years. I'm sure they're still making a lot of money, but they're very quiet. So the Iranians know that the West supports all this, and Western media, through its silence, is facilitating the genocide, and therefore Iran, they threatened the Israeli regime, and ultimately, if Iran feels that things are going to go too far, it will extend those threats. It will go further, and Iran is not going to allow the Lebanese to be ethnically cleansed. And Iran is going to take reparations for Lebanon too. Have no doubt about it. And all of those buildings will be rebuilt. Hezbollah is doing an extraordinary job. They are really humiliating this sinister regime. And in their rage, they go and bomb kids and
Yeah.
families and hospitals and ambulances because they are losing on the battlefield. And again, this Hezbollah is um, is is just amazing. They've been amazing since it's been amazing what they've been doing since their inception. And it's very sad to see that what the Americans and the Europeans are doing in Lebanon right now, how sinister it is. Those NGOs that I was alluding to, right now, they're funded by the West. What they and these Arab regimes in the Persian Gulf are doing is they're funding their proxies in Lebanon, their agents, and telling them not to allow refugees in their neighborhoods. So the West is telling it's coordinating with it and its NGOs and those people who they fund. They are refusing to allow refugees into neighborhoods that are controlled or influenced by these groups. And the Saudis and the Qataris and the Emiratis and others, they too are doing the same thing. They're telling people not to allow the refugees to come to their neighborhood. So what the plan, and the Lebanese government is doing the same. The prime minister and the president, they're basically U.S. agents. They are also preventing the refugees from. So what the Israelis and the West and these Arab dictatorships are trying to do is to corner them, to make them desperate, to crush the resistance, their supporters. Of course, there are people from all backgrounds, religious and so on, that ignore them and support the resistance. The resistance has support from all the different communities: Christian, Muslim, Druze, Shia, Sunni. Polls show that they have strong support, especially among the youth, especially among the youth. But I'm just trying to point out how sinister Western embassies are, and Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the Emirates are. They're all collaborating with Israel. It's the same thing as in Syria. They all collaborated against Syria, did a dirty war for the sake of Israel. Right now, if the current regime, we knew that if Syria would fall, that it would be a U.S. proxy, and Al Qaeda and ISIS are U.S. proxies. Right now is the best time for the Syrians to resist and to take back their land, because the Israeli regime is overextended. But these fanatical Wahhabis and Al Qaeda people, are they going to do anything against Israel? Of course not. That was never a part of the plan. If they would, the Iranians would support. The first people to support them would be Iran and the resistance. I mean, Turkey under Erdogan would never do anything like that, but Iran would immediately help. But it was obvious that this was not going to happen. So Hezbollah is surrounded by Al Qaeda and ISIS, by U.S. proxies in Beirut and in Lebanon, and Saudi and Qatari and Emirati proxies, and the Israeli regime. But despite all that, they're battering the Israeli regime on the battlefield. And that is something that history books will be talking about in the decades ahead. This, alongside the defeat of the United States on the battlefield against Iran, I think are the two most extraordinary moments of this region in decades. Even I think it's greater than the 33-day war where Hezbollah defeated the Israeli regime, because this time around Hezbollah is truly surrounded.
Yeah, and we are, I think, really witnessing, Professor Marandi, for maybe it's hard to say what the first time in a conclusion like this really is, but what we are witnessing in very clear view is that neither the U.S. nor Israel, if you take both of these, the U.S. with Iran and Israel with Hezbollah, has no capacity militarily to affect any kind of outcome. And that is certainly historic in many ways. And I just want to pull up, because there's a few big problems that face the United States that are coming up, I think, with Iran's retaliation. I'm sure Iran would view what it did last night with striking Kuwait and Bahrain as a very limited operation. But nonetheless, it exposes major difficulties for the United States. One is the fact that half, according to CSIS, one of these warmongering think tanks funded by the U.S. State Department, U.S. Department of Defense, half of all U.S. Patriot air defense interceptors have been used before the ceasefire, Professor Marandi. And now there are videos like this coming out of last night's retaliation where Kuwait is using what they have left, these Patriot interceptors, and they're not working well. So every successive retaliation here, this is the Patriot interceptor coming absolutely back down on Kuwait. Every retaliation that Iran does, even if it is limited according to Iran's own standards, will continue to pose big problems for the United States. And then there's the fact, Professor Marandi, that there's some economists who are saying that once in a week's time, when these oil reserves that the U.S. has released out into the market in order to somewhat control the at least what the perceived view, the public view, price of oil that we see coming out every day on the market. Once that runs out in about a week's time, the real impact of the shortage in oil that has been facilitated by the U.S. and Israeli war aggression will be felt, leading possibly to a recession. So you say Donald Trump said he could wait. Marco Rubio said the same thing, 30, 60, 90 days. There are economists who are saying you don't even have a week. So these are two major problems for us, Marandi, that seem to point to, yeah, the U.S. can strike. It can do what it did with Keshem Island. Hell, maybe it could do an even bigger strike, but it won't last long and it won't have the intended effects. So your thoughts about this?
Oil experts and energy experts are saying between 1 week, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, that this is going to go downhill. And some say by mid-June, some say by early July. But even after that, if this continues, it's just going to get progressively worse. And even if we were to have a deal tonight, which is impossible, this crisis is going to hit, and it's going to hit hard. But if it continues, this situation, it's going to hit even harder, and it's going to last longer. So Trump has already created a catastrophe that we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, but gradually we're getting closer and closer. And so the Iranians don't, I've seen this online before. Some people say that Iran wants to sink the U.S. economy. That's not what Iran is seeking to do. What Iran wants is a deal. Iran didn't start the war. Iran didn't start the siege. Iran didn't escalate in the war. Iran never began any war. This is the third time that the United States launches a war against Iran. In 1980, they pushed Saddam Hussein to attack Iran. The West gave him chemical weapons. These Arab regimes that helped the United States against Iran gave Saddam Hussein hundreds of billions of dollars. And ultimately, what did he do in return? He invaded Kuwait, but that's a different story. And then, of course, last year's war, we're almost on the anniversary of last year's war, and this war that is ongoing. The war is not over. So the Iranians never initiated war. They never escalated. They only respond to escalation, but sometimes they hit very hard to prevent the United States from continuing this like they did last night. The Iranian response was much stronger, much more powerful than the American strike on a tanker. I mean, they bombed a tanker, and these are all civilian targets, and these are barbaric acts. But in Western media, no one is outraged, just as they weren't outraged. They're not outraged by the carpet bombing in Lebanon. And by the way, in the southern city of Sur in Lebanon, I think in English it's Tyre. I'm not quite sure what they call it in English.
Yeah.
But the Israelis are telling the Christians not to let the supporters of the resistance, meaning the refugees, the Shia, predominantly Shia families, into their neighborhoods. Otherwise, they're going to bomb them. So they're sort of like the Nazis who are seeking out, who we see in all these movies, how they seek out Jews and so on. Our Nazis are seeking out the Muslims in Christian neighborhoods or in predominantly Sunni neighborhoods. And as I said, these Wahhabis and the Salafis that are basically proxies of the West, they are trying to prevent the people from allowing the refugees into their neighborhoods. So, but of course, as I said, many Christians and many Muslims, Sunni, Shia, Druze, they are ignoring them. But it is causing a lot of difficulty, especially since the proxy regime in Beirut is also collaborating to prevent the refugees from finding any place to go. And if they had destroyed Dahia, the south of Lebanon, it would have been a very desperate situation. But in any case, I think that right now we are at a point where Trump cannot wait much longer, and that doesn't mean he's going to sign a deal. I'm just saying that he cannot wait much longer because the effects of the energy shortage and the shortage of helium and the shortage of fertilizers and all other petrochemical products is going to begin hitting hard. And I think that the globe is going to become increasingly outraged. The world at the U.S. and Netanyahu and Trump, and the American people are going to become increasingly angry towards Trump and Netanyahu and the Zionists and their lobby.
Yeah, and as you were talking, I got some more information about some of the human cost of the U.S. provoking Iran's retaliation. Of course, again, we don't know exactly what led to these casualties, but about 63 people in Kuwait are said to have been injured. At least one has died from the activity last night. And I'm also hearing that in Bahrain, the government, shocker here, arrested at least 12 people supposedly being blamed or associated with providing some kind of information to Iran in order to affect these strikes. So panic all around across the Gulf. And Professor Marandi, I'm hearing too, you said that some have said that Iran wants to crash the U.S. economy. I've heard from many people maybe who view the situation in the war closer to how we do, say that no, it's actually the United States and the Epstein class that has an interest in tanking the economy. Now, I don't think that's across the board, because I do believe that there are some within the so-called capital markets who are very concerned about what happens in a recession to them. They tend to shrink. Some of them tend to lose their status as Epstein class members, lose their wealth, lose their money. But there are, of course, quite a few who love to cash in, especially on the government stimulus that comes in when a crash does happen. But what say you to this? Because there are some who believe that there are many within the Epstein class gambling on an economic crash as like an inevitable outcome that maybe they'll just benefit from anyway. And that's why they are reluctant to put any pressure on their lieutenant in the White House, Donald Trump, to stop this war.
I think that's definitely the case for some, because if there is a crash, then these very extremely wealthy people will be able to pick up a lot of pieces for themselves. And they'll be able to purchase lots of assets at a very low price, especially if there are, if there is government financial assistance, which they'll all benefit from. But it will not benefit the United States. It will be catastrophic for the United States. But these people, they are in it for themselves. This is all for their own selfish interests. Personally, I'm of the opinion that there are many divisions among the ruling class, let's say, in the United States, the Epstein class, even the Zionists. And I personally think, and this is just speculation, and I may be wrong, but I think that the Axios, which is completely dishonest, and they've lied many times about differences between Biden and Netanyahu to make Biden look as if he's opposed to what's going on.
Right.
And then Trump as well. I mean, we're at the anniversary of the 12-day war almost. And back then there was this Axios report that Trump wants to wait and see if diplomacy can work. And then they attacked Iran. So it was all just to deceive.
Yeah.
But this time around, it's a bit different because what Axios put out was very humiliating to Netanyahu. It was not just a it was not just like the two have differences. This, I think, was I mean uh, very hurtful to Netanyahu, and you could see it in the Hebrew press and people who want to follow what goes on. I mean, the Hebrew press is the real Israel, and that's where they show their racism and their ugliness and their ethno supremacism and how they view themselves as a master people and all that. But it doesn't reflect much in the English. But Conflicts Forum, Alistair Crook's think tank, does a very good job. His wife Ashling, she does this, and I think people should follow her work on the Hebrew press. And the Netanyahu has been attacked severely after this exchange, and even by his own political allies, let alone his opponents. So he's been weakened, and I'm of the belief that maybe those people who put out this piece of news in Axios, and it's not just Trump because he's, as you say, just a lieutenant, but maybe they wanted to humiliate Netanyahu. Maybe some of the Zionists think that Netanyahu is now his continued presence is detrimental to their interests because the entire world is turned against the Israeli regime.
Yeah.
The American people have turned against the Israeli regime, and many may think that this is dangerous because if the American people turn against Zionism, and which we see happening already, we see on the right people like Candace Owens and um, uh, and Tucker Carlson, hitting very hard now, and of course Thomas Massey, and I think actually his defeat was a bad thing for the Zionists because it sort of was a wake up call. If he had won, I think it would have been better for Zionism. But this way, it's sort of creating a greater awareness about how bad things are. And so I think maybe perhaps many Zionists and the Epstein class, the donor class, some of them may be worried that they have to perhaps have a new prime minister. The elections are close, and maybe if they have a new prime minister, they could put all the blame on Netanyahu. And even though it's a genocidal society and the opposition is just as genocidal, Netanyahu's members of the opposition are saying you should flatten Dahia, you should flatten southern Beirut, right? One of their criticisms of him is that he should ignore Trump and do it. So it's not as if they're any better, but maybe some of these Zionists think it's time to give the regime a facelift, and that's why they put out this very humiliating piece of news. Again, this is just sheer speculation on my part. But what it in any case, this was not good for the regime. This was humiliating for the regime, and also maybe they wanted to spare Trump because Trump is increasingly just seen as a pawn of the Zionists, and by putting this out, maybe it could help him look some more independent, which is of course nonsense. But I think that there was a purpose for this, and I think it has to do with the future of the Israeli elections. I may be wrong. I'm just guessing.